manyoko son oui ya son nanamu Tia kpane bato we otomoni o ya do mo si akwie ya o Amo manyoko son oui ya son denbemu ya Tia kpane bato we otomoni o ya do mo si akwie ya o Tia se pa yanju o se pa yanju o ya kian sa pa yanju ka o kian ma se pa yanju ju o so si o lele ya si o lele o ya si o lele o ya si o lele yo amon manyo ko so wi ya son dan be mu Tia kpane bato we otomoni o abiyan mi do mo si akwie ya o Kian se pa yan jiju o mama Kian se pa yan jiju o re son ke wo kian ya kian se pa yan ju o Kian ye uri money mo re tole se ma bembe son bi Kian ye uri manjo e abato ni Passion même oh Kian ya we money Mo retole si ama memu pio abinyo be Wo kian
Ladies and gentlemen, with that song from the legendary Jida Rooster, no, not Jida Rooster, Caesar Gatto, that's the Bassa King, we say welcome to yet another edition of Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to take a step back and look at the current state of our nation, Liberia. With everything that is going on, what do you think? What do you make of it? Where are we heading? You can give us some examples of the issues. What are some of your concerns? What are some of the areas that we are making progress? What are some of the areas that we are having a little bit of challenge? What do you make of the things that are happening? Quite recently, there was this press conference from Henry Pedro Costa. So there's been this Costa and Boakai fight back and forth, if you may. Also, there's a corruption czar, or Mr. Boakai has laid out his plan for anti-corruption in the country. So the whole issue of corruption, how do we fight it? And all kinds of things. I have given my panelists the latitude to bring up the issues that really they want to talk about as we take a step back and look at the current state of affairs of our nation. With me to discuss this on Tough Talking Thursday, we have our governance consultant, Mr. Atmer K. Salif. Mr. Salif, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. Let's do it. I'm looking forward to it.
And Mr. Salif is, it's not by mistake, our governance consultant. He does this for a living. He talks to politicians, advise them on how to do their campaigns. He is even teaching courses in diplomacy. This guy, you won't believe he's a guy who his mom told to stay in the line, don't move. Oh, yeah, you see now. Let me also welcome Mr. Thomas Kanner. He's a recent graduate from grad school with Eat, Drink, and Sleep Policy. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. Good to be here.
We're glad to have Thomas going to all the elite schools here in the States for graduate studies. Thomas, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Dennis. Good to be here.
Let me also welcome our political analyst, Mr. Mohammed Sharif, a product of Waplo Institute, all the way from Kalipo, Kanweke. Mr. Sharif, welcome to the show.
Dennis, it's always great to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif has a history of managing institutions, including the famous.
Yes, sir. Yes. The AMA.
AMA in Zerikore, AMA was this branch of the UN,
right,
that was entrusted to host kind of youth programs like the one we are having. Right. So Mr. Sharif used to be the secretary of AMA. So AMA is an institution, but they were given that contract to kind of do youth programs. So I interacted with Mr. Sharif 30 years ago, and he's still here.
Yes.
And I must say that he was not corrupt. So we submitted our budget. It went through. It went through the flagpole. It was approved. Sometime we had some cuts, and we
Right.
executed.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif, for your service. We want to welcome all
Yeah, thank you.
viewers from across the globe. This is Tough Talking Thursday. We have Mr. Kalebo Gonglo. Mr. Gonglo is going to be here in a minute. Also, Dr. Abdullah Dukle is on his way. We want to welcome all of you, and it's good that we are here again to talk tough. Talking about talking tough, I want to introduce this with the issue of corruption, right? Councillor Tiawan say Gonglo carries his broom, say he's sweeping corruption and bad governance.
I'll get to it. You say give it?
We also have Mr. Boakai just appointed, or he said he's going to, when he takes office, he's going to appoint a corruption czar. Mr. Cummings will tell you, he said, we're not even going to address it. It's stealing. He called it stealing. And I mentioned that Mr. Sherry was not corrupt when he was at AMA, and he approved those budgets. So I want us to start with this whole idea of corruption. What really do we, and there are certain things that are sometimes, what really is corruption? And what do you think about those who are making their plans about corruption? What is it and how can we fight it? And let me give you my side of the story, right? Because I want us to kind of share ideas here. Sometimes if Mr. Gonglo is working in a place and I have recommendation and I send somebody to Mr. Gonglo and say, hey, I want this person to go through the process, but I'm recommending him to you. Is that corruption? Sometimes we look at the things the kids do. Sometimes you send somebody to buy something and then they keep the change. Is that corruption? But I want us to kind of limit it to the one when you are in public office. Let me start with Kalebo Gonglo. Mr. Gonglo, I want us to talk about corruption a bit before we start, before you bring up your issue. That's my issue of corruption. What is causing it? And do you see, the way that this nemesis can be fought in Liberia and defeated?
I think, in my view, in a constitutional democracy, there are rules, there are guidelines, we have constitution. You have civil service standing order that spells out how people get hired as a civil servant. So the way to fight corruption is, or to identify corruption, is to look at what our statutes say about corruption, what our constitution say. So we have to use a legal framework to fight corruption and as well define what constitutes corruption. Now, added to that, we have a new statute, the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct defines who is a government official, who is not. And it gives the different levels of responsibility and expectation. So if we had to do that, we look at those instruments, one, our constitution, the civil service standing order, the code of conduct, what the PPCC Act say, the Act creating the AECC, what the Act creating the General Auditing Commission says, and even the internal auditing manual. So there are a whole lot of instruments available to government, how to fight corruption and how to define corruption. So like the example you are giving, I think we are looking at in a context. Right here in the US, I teach in a school district, a public school district. And I just called it HR yesterday. I say, hey, the school year has ended. I have my evaluation. Am I getting a raise for next academic year, or I should move to a different school district? And she said to me, no. We'll come in. We're going to have the addition soon. I will get back to you. And I said, are you guys looking for math teacher? I know someone who is a math teacher, or you was teaching a charter school. I told him to leave the charter school and come to public school because there are better benefits and opportunity. And she said, "Oh, you know him? Give me his name and his email address." She's looking for math teacher. She's ready to hire him, right? But the procedure for hiring with the school district is you must go online, fill in your application, apply, do all the attachment, put it in, and they will evaluate it, send it to whatever school they want to send it to. The principal will evaluate and then call you for interview. By me giving that name to her yesterday, does that mean the person will cut short all that process? That person will still be interviewed. That person will still have to apply. That person must also meet the same condition. But just by me being a star within the system, and I say I have someone who can teach math or who has been teaching math, that person is having the advantage to move the applications maybe one step faster. Okay, so I think it's a little not clear there whether that is unethical on her part to try to maybe say, "Get me the person name, the email address, and the telephone number," and I did.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Sharif, quite recently, we heard from the press conference of Henry Pedro Costa that somebody came to him and said, "I have 30 millions and I want you to run for president." And he saw that, according to him, as a golden opportunity, not a crime, not any form of bribery, as a golden opportunity, which he willingly passed on to his uncle, Mr. Joseph Newman Boakai. And up to now, up to his press conference, he did not see that anything was wrong with it. So I want you to look at that. Is that corruption? If you have, let's say, I'm assuming that's a foreign entity coming and say, "I have 30 million, go and run to be president." And he did not disclose what was the term of agreement, but the thought of that and not recognizing it, that there's something wrong with it. If what you make of that is this corruption, and what does not Mr. Costa not even recognizing that this is wrong? What does that say about
Dennis, before look, please excuse me, forgive me. When it comes to certain issue, Dennis, we have to be very clear here. I think the question you're asking is a bit biased and incomplete. I'm sorry to say that.
All right.
Because you know what? On the 30 million saga, it was not just Henry Costa. So if you want to ask a question for Mohammed to answer, name all those associated with it. And ask a question now whether the role they play, knowing what they know. I mean,
Mr. Gonglo, give me a break. Right. Henry Costa announced that somebody came to me and gave me 30 million. Then I say, hold on. This is a golden opportunity, but I can't do this. Let me pass it to Joseph Newman Boakai. That's Costa saying it. Is that not a true statement?
It's a true statement.
All
but
right.
It's also a true statement that Boakai agreed to go to the meeting.
We don't know what Boakai was.
His son said attended the meeting.
Hold on. Boakai did not tell us that he went to the meeting knowing that there was 30 million on the table. So I can't quote that. I'm quoting Costa, who said there was 30 million and didn't recognize whether that was corruption or not. No, go ahead, Mr. Sharif.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for that question. So first, before I launch into that, if you permit me to go back to something that was left out on the last show, I'm doing this for a reason. Someone disputed what I said, and so the Mandingo people have a parable, and they say that remark will overtake you in the very spot that remark is made. And so if you don't come back and clarify, and then you will be left at the mercy of misinterpretation and what have you. So the issue I am referring to is I made reference to the Sawyer Constitution last week. I did state that it was terrible that draft constitution had 9 years for senators And you both, learner brothers, Dukley and you, Dennis, contradicted that to say it wasn't Sawyer, that it was Edward B. Kesley. However, upon further research, because that's what we do as intellectuals, that's what we should do. Upon further research, I discover that the Sawyer Constitution had 8 years for senator. So it was so damn long. It's the same thing. So Edward Kesley Advisory Commission added a year to that. So that 1 year is negligible. So I can sit here now and say I was correct. So you can check Article 47 of the draft Constitution, which is the draft Constitution. Dennis, copy of what you sent me. Sawyer proposed 8 years. And Article 45 of the revised Constitution has 8 years. Doesn't make a difference. They are both terrible. So a guy by the name of, under some pseudonym, Mohammed Sano, went on an attack, of my person, which, I don't usually read these comments. I'm not an active, social media person. I think, most of you guys know that. But anytime I see the name Muhammad, someone whose name, first name is Muhammad, or Ahmed, or Amadou, or Mamadou, or Mamadi, those kinds of names are usually smart guys and smart individuals, smart people. But this other person, it's certain Mohammed Sano, is brain dead. I mean, I think that these are George Ware's. George Ware has kept people uneducated, and people are thinking like, small children now, small little boys and girls. George Ware has kept some of these people brain dead, but I could see that he was fighting to support the administration. So that is what I wanted to address. So I wasn't altogether wrong. I can say that I was correct. That 1 year is negligible. They were both terrible. So now, coming back to the question that you asked, the question is relevant in view of what is going on now. So you have the opposition that is fighting to unseat George Ware. And one of the things that Mr. Ware is accused of, Dennis, time and time and again, is corruption. We all say that George Ware, and some of us have gone on record to say George Ware is one of the most corrupt presidents in the Republic of Liberia. And that is not a figment of our imagination. When we say that, there are evidences all over the place that George Ware is very corrupt. When George Ware entered the executive mansion, sooner or later, he was he was constructing, real estate, investing into real estate all over the place. You look at the George Ware administration, the top guns in the Ware administration, most of these guys are millionaires. By their own admission, they are corrupt. So we know that. We know they're corrupt. They have admitted that. The problem is now that the opposition fighting to unseat Ware also are now spilling their dirty laundry into the public. You mentioned Henry Costa. Henry Costa said that there were some financiers who promised $30 million to the Boaca campaign, and one of the reasons why there was a fortune allegedly is because of that $30 million issue. So, we're going to discuss this within the context of what Costa is telling us. I agree with Gonglo. The other side of this, there's always the other side of that story. So what is JNB's version of the story? We haven't heard much of that, but just judging by what Henry Costa is saying. Henry Costa was a very close associate of JNB. So is he telling a lie? So we have to evaluate whether what he's telling us is true or not. Because of his closeness, we have, a lot of us have the proclivity to believe that he's not telling a lie. A lot of us tend to believe that because this is a dear cousin of JNB, that he's not telling a lie. But we have to also be careful because right now there's a friction between them, and so he may not be telling a lot, but is there a motive? The motive could be that he's a loggerheads now with JNB. But if JNB did this,
Let me interrupt. Before we get to JNB, the fact that Costa is accepting this 30 million and did not recognize it as
okay,
wrong, is that corruption?
the fact that this is he correctly implicated himself, and your question is well in place. Yes, that is corruption. That is because keep in mind these business people, business interests were allegedly promised the some business concession in Liberia if they got elected into office. So is this what the ruling elite, is this what individuals who are seeking public office, and this is what we've heard all along, that this is what they're engaged in. They're engaged in pay to play. So that is corruption. So individuals who don't have money to pay the politicians don't get the same luxury. You and I are not going to get the same contract. You and I are not going to get the same kind of treatment if JNB or someone else is elected, given what Costa is saying. And it is very, very dangerous for a country like Liberia. So yes, absolutely. He sees nothing wrong with it, but we see something wrong with it. That's corruption. So you're selling your country to the highest donor, to the highest bidder, and that is corruption.
Mr. Sharif, and this Mr. Salif, this speaks to the bigger issue, because even those of us that were watching the show who were concerned mainly about what is between Costa and Bwaka, not really focusing that this is a big deal, that there's 30 million being allegedly offered, and people were not speaking more on that aspect, that there's a potential for the entire country to be sold for 30 million.
A country can never be sold for 30 million. In our context, our country, we have resource constraints, so we think that 30 million is a lot of money. But so anyway, that's just a comment in response to the last part of your question there. But Dennis, if we accept Henry Costa's story, and first of all, your question assumes that the facts, as Costa presented his story, that everything he stated was fact. It is correct.
Not necessarily. What I'm saying is, he is telling us, hey, somebody give me 30 million. And
so I'm just telling you, you're asking me to discuss an issue which I have all kinds of questions about.
Right.
So, and the premise of your question does not really allow me to dig into those questions that I have about what that individual said. This individual may be popular, may be in the media space, and therefore has garnered political influence in our country, and of course, large following, young people, and so on. Granted, you have to give him that, and you stated earlier on, I talked to people running for office. Yeah, you want people who have following, who have influence, who are influencers, to be a part of your campaign. Now, we hope that those people have integrity. They bring integrity to your association with them. Their association with you does not undermine your own personal integrity, right? Now, Mr. Costa, people have questioned some of his transactions, some of what we read about, hear about in the media, and so on, and even some of his utterances. And therefore, to me, that presents a credibility question. And now, in the larger context of a political fight, a political divorce, all kinds of things happen. People do personal attacks. People engage in more than name calling, right? They will engage in conduct that they hope will bring their opponent down, will crumble the campaign, everything they stand for. So Mr. Costa has reasons to engage in those kinds of theatrics, if you ask me. Now, so that's just a premise of my response to what you're asking me to do. In terms of the question around whether or not that was corruption is selling our country, Look, in every election around the world, there are lobbyists, there are individuals, wealthy individuals, heads of corporations who reach out to candidates that show promise and try to ingratiate themselves with these candidates so that should this person win, I will have some kind of influence. I will have access. They're essentially buying access, right? It happens here in the United States. So the difference is how effective are campaign finance law in Liberia? Are we a society that respects rule of law? Are we a society that respects institutions? Do we even pay attention to these questions? So if we take it in that context and look at this alleged $30 million that was pitched to Costa and then he passed it on to allegedly to Mr. Borkai, granted all of those are facts as Costa presented them, in order for me to say, well, this was corrupt or this was tantamount to selling our country, I will have to go back into what does our election legal framework say about campaign contribution. Somebody, we're making an assumption. We don't even know these individuals, were they Liberians, were they outside wealthy individuals, were they corporation? What was the context? What was the nature of it? All we know is what Mr. Costa has put out there in the public domain. At least that's what I have heard. I haven't heard directly what I'm hearing people say. Mr. Barkai's son, Joseph Barkai Jr. stated, whether that's something truth or not. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I heard directly from Mr. Costa. So there's so many things to unpack before one can say, oh, this, our country was being sold. It's okay to reach out to somebody. If I know Mohammed is going to be elected, it looks like this guy is the real deal in this election, I can reach out to Mohammed and say, look, listen, I'm really interested in Liberia. This is who I am. This is what I do. I have a company that does, Liberia, we have a concession economy, right? And so I would be interested in exploring and having a conversation with your government. I want to support your campaign. Now, that is fine.
You mean as a foreign entity or a Liberian?
That's what I said. What does our election campaign finance law say about those things? Okay. How much can an individual contribute? How much is an individual or a Liberian, a foreigner, a company, or an individual allowed to contribute legally? What's the reporting requirement? Did Costa or Mr. Barkai have any obligation under campaign finance law to report? Was it in the purview of the Elections Commission or some other authority in Liberia? Those are the questions that I have to unpack before I can start saying, oh, they were going to sell Liberia. And I don't think anybody can sell Liberia for $30 million.
Well, sir, it's in close code. Let me welcome Dr. Abdullah Dukle, who's a panelist here also. Dr. Duke, welcome to Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you, Dennis.
And let me also welcome
everyone.
Thank you. Let me also welcome former Supreme Court Justice, Councillor Kabina Jane. Councillor Kambina Mohammed Jane, welcome to Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you very much. And hello to all of you there.
Oh, good. Thomas, I wanted to go to Councillor Kabina Jane because Mr. Salib is talking about campaign finance and all that. But let me, knowing a little bit about elections of Mr. Kana in Liberia, is it corruption for someone, let's assume a foreign entity coming and say, let me give you 40 million or 30 million so that you can run for president, so that I can support your campaign? And my question really was, the fact that if that is corruption, the fact that if it is not recognized by the people involved or even by the public, that there's something wrong here.
Well, I want us to be a little careful with the way we discuss the issue. Like somebody approached Costa and said, here is 30 million, and he passed the 30 million over to Ambassador Barkai. I don't think that was the case. He was approached and was told that these people said they have conducted a survey and he was a winnable candidate and they were willing to support his campaign. And then he said he was already supporting Ambassador Barkai. So I think to say that maybe the money was passed on.
No, he didn't stop there. He said I would prefer you, use
So
the 30 million on the Bwaka campaign instead.
yeah, that's the point I'm making, and I'm glad we have a lawyer on the panel tonight. So the point is, he said, okay, you
We
think
got
I
two
can
lawyers.
win? There was already a prophecy. You are essentially validating the prophecy of a religious leader who has prophesied this, but I'm already supporting Ambassador Bwaka, so I would prefer that you discuss with him. So I don't think we got to the point of actually the money being transacted. This was all part of negotiation. But
Okay.
going back to the campaign's finance law, I think it's very clear that in our elections, resources that are not generated internally, that are coming from foreign sources that are not part of the country, should not be used in our electoral processes. So I think this is the greatest dilemma about this whole thing, because in his press statement, Costa brought out almost every information, whether it was health related, the room that he met in, but he could not say who were these influential people. And to me, his line of the text, like I said the other day, it's like he said influential people in the body politics of Liberia. And my issue was that these people, if they are very influential and powerful people, then essentially I could draw from there that these were internal actors. Because, like I said, you cannot be an external actor and just move onto a country that is going to have election and conduct a survey. It's often political actors who hire these research institutes and firms, election consultants, to say, come and do a study for me. So I'm drawing from Costa's text that these people are essentially Liberians, because he said he conducted a survey, they've analyzed it, and they said he can win. So essentially, I'm saying they are Liberians. So if they are Liberians, perhaps then the campaign's finance law could allow the resources to be used because these are Liberians. But if they are not Liberians, then the campaign's finance law, that would be a violation of the campaign's finance law, regardless of what the amount is. I think there are regulations on how much you can even take in terms of donation, but $30 million, I would think, will essentially be above the threshold, which would be a violation of the existing laws that we have in place. So at this point in time, I'm not sure how we judge it. I mean, was the intent behind it? Is it what we are talking about? Because we didn't get to the point of actually any money of changing hands. But essentially, if these are foreign actors, considering the amount that they are calling, I can say that it will have eventually violated our laws.
Thank you. Let me go to Councillor
Dennis, if I can just make a quick point here on what
we have minute. We have minute.
I know we have minute, but Thomas is giving information that is not entirely true on the question of survey. That he doesn't think that a foreign entity can just go to a country and they must be hired by either political entity. That's not entirely true, Thomas.
No, I'm saying, I'm saying, say there's an election in Sierra Leone, right?
Yes.
You cannot just be a business person, say you are in the US and you go and conduct a survey in Sierra Leone. That is a sovereign country. So it's, 1 minute, let me just finish. Let me finish. It's either you are hired by a political actor, or maybe you are a civil society institution, or you are a research institute. You are trying to do opinion polls. But what I'm saying is that a foreign actor cannot just enter a country and conduct a survey without some sort of approval from national authorities.
Thank you. Let us.
But you don't have to even enter the country in digital age to conduct a survey. You can even just do the country and see who has more new recognition in the country. You can do it.
Thank you.
And Costa didn't say anyway.
Hold on, Councillor Gonklo. Leave the Costa business.
No, I mean, I'm just saying we should. Our listeners listening to us must be able to inform them. I mean, give them every bit of information. Yeah. It's true.
Right, I was going to Councillor Janet before Dr. Douglas wanted to say something. All right, Councillor Janet.
Well, I can't stop the imam from speaking before. I don't slap Councillor. I can't stop him. So let him go, and then I can. But if I can put in 1 minute, I think we're wasting a lot of time on this. There was a political divorce. No money was taken. No country was sold. Nobody can sell a mountain. You got to be dumb. Come on. Why are we spending time speculating? Oh, this is what it means. This is what it means. Come on, guys. Go move on. There was a political divorce. When you divorce somebody, sometimes you fight, sometimes you don't fight. Sometimes people say, okay, it was amicable divorce. Sometimes people complain about the spouse, the other spouse. Waka and Costa, for the time being, broke up. So let's leave it. Go to serious issues. I'm thinking, I'm not even going to discuss anymore.
Right.
I'm not getting to the
And
subject. So
Dugu,
that's my thing.
I was not looking at it like that. I was looking at that bombshell that people gloss over, that we're not talking about, that is not grabbing the headlines, that assuming if some, even if you are, I'm saying, did he come to implicate himself or indict himself here to say somebody came and say, I'm giving me 30 million and say this is golden opportunity, but at the same time calling other people corrupt and not recognizing that piece. That's the piece, the corruption piece I wanted to talk about. But Councillor Jana, let me go to you on
Yeah, but
corruption law. Go ahead.
I think that's an issue. Yeah, if somebody come and say, yeah, somebody gave me $30 million, why would anybody give you $30 million for an election? And who are the people who can give $30 million today? Those are people who can spend $140 million on drug deal and say, oh well, we lost one shipment. Next shipment will be $500 million. So $30 million is nothing to them. But for a real investor, people who made their money hard way, they don't just come and say, hey, you look good on TV. We're going to give you $30 million to run for campaign. Come on, let's be serious. This is a whole joke. I think it's a whole, the whole thing is a joke. I mean, the only thing you can say, yes, you in contact with who? Who are these people? Are they Italians, mafia, Russian drug dealers, Russian oligarchs, Colombians, or are they CDC people? Tell us who gave you $30 million for Liberian election in a country that has a budget of $700 million? What do they want?
What do they
I'm
want?
done with
That's
it.
the question. Councillor Jana, I mean, we know of LACC, but let's talk about corruption law in Liberia. We know of the LACC, we know of, I always forget which P come before the C. We know of the code of conduct. What are the election laws or the anti-corruption laws and institutions in the country, and whose business is it to make sure that these are enforced, and how are we doing in that department? Councillor Janet.
It seems like I'm having some internet problem here.
Okay.
I'm hardly hearing you. It keeps going.
We are hearing you clearly.
Yeah. I didn't get the question clearly.
The question is about corruption in Liberia. What are the laws that are intended to fight corruption in Liberia? Just briefly. Or the
Wow. That's a fully loaded question. There are many laws on corruption. Well, if you're talking about election related or campaign, the latest campaign regulation I've seen is dated May 6, 2016. And it sets an amount of $2 million for presidential campaign, and then $1 million for vice president, and then they have the others line up. But the question you will have to ask yourself is, how is this monitored? Even if you talk about $2 million for a presidential campaign, how realistic is this figure? By the time you buy 40 pickups, but there's a bigger problem because the Elections Commission has no capacity to monitor anything. So what you, in fact, I'm told that there should be some discussion on this in a few days.
all right. We have an issue with
Listen, Miami.
Yeah.
The justice is having some trouble here. All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, we can see that, Justice Johnny. Are you with us now?
Yes, I'm here, on
All
and
right.
off.
Okay. Let's go. I know you also have concern with the composition of the election commission. So while you are on the election issue, I just want you to flow.
Yes, there is a protocol of the of ECOWAS which deals specifically about conflict prevention and focuses largely on elections in West Africa and the composition of the election commission. That protocol, of which Liberia is a signatory, requires every member country to constitute its national elections body in a way that it reflects and inspires the confidence of the opposition community. It would seem to me that during the last elections, Mrs. Selig, as president of Liberia, tried as much as she could to include figures from the opposition community. I'm aware that the current chair of the National Elections Commission was someone who was basically nominated by the CDC. In fact, Mr. Weir himself personally nominated her. And after the she was appointed by Mrs. Selig as member of the National Elections Commission. She's currently the chair. And so there were a few other persons on the commission. But currently it will appear to me that almost everyone on that commission has some sort of relationship with only the ruling party. There is no credible opposition community on the commission. And that for me is very worrisome given the kind of body we have had, especially during the 2017 election, and all of the things that happened. So I'm not sure we have paid much focus on this.
Janus, will we be allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Councillor John, are you done? Or is it?
I mean, he was making such an
Yes,
important
sir.
point.
All right. So election commission is an issue. Yeah, Mr. Gonglo, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for the big brother there, Councillor Cabinet Janet. My question is, he talks about the credibility of the election commission because there is an absence of a credible people from opposition, correct?
Something
Our
like that.
law, our laws, our constitution gives the prerogative to constitute the commission to the president. Is that right?
Well, the appointing authority of the commission is the president of the Republic of Liberia. But there is a protocol also of which Liberia is signatory that requires that that body be constituted in a shape and manner that reflects the confidence of the opposition community. And the tradition we have followed throughout has been that. That's my point.
Yeah. So Justice, if I may ask further, do you know, since you're raising that issue, do you know for fact if the legislature has actually ratified that protocol, or if Liberia signed on to that, has it been domesticated into our local laws?
That's my information,
All right.
unless I see evidence to the contrary.
All right. So, because I'm of the view that It's still the prerogative of the president to do that. But to also just counter this a little bit, to give the counter narrative to that, when you listen to the U.S. ambassador, Mike McCarthy, in his press interview, the most recent one, the journalist asked him what he thought on the Elections Commission, saying he was departing Liberia. And he said, in his view, the commission was credible because they've conducted 2 by-elections that the opposition has won. That was his response.
Mhm.
Yeah, he said the ruling party has lost 2, fiercely fought, contested by-elections, and he thought that was a good sign for Liberia.
And
And
what
he,
you think? And what you think, Mr. Gonglo, about that?
well, what I don't want to reconstruct is I have issue concern with credibility of many Liberians in many high places. But the way our law is framed, we have very imperial system that one person just has the authority, and more or less that person authority is even the legislature is just an extension of the person authority. In fact, the Supreme Court, where my respected justice served, is also an extension of the executive in many respects in Liberia. I'm not saying Sierra Leone.
So you mean it's okay, or please drive the point. So is that because the president has the appointing power, he can appoint anybody he wants, and we can't question it? Is
Of
that the
course,
point?
I mean that's a prerogative. Whoever the president appoints is a reflection of the president. It's a
Therefore,
reflection of the president.
therefore, we should take it. No question
Well,
asked.
I mean, what is a legal recourse you have? Can you go to court and say, I'm challenging this authority because they should not appoint all sedition, or they should not appoint all UP people? No, you can't, because the law will not be on your side, as I
Thank you.
know it.
Thank you, Mr. Salif. Talking about the election commission or elections in general, or as we go into this election, Councillor Jana raised his concern. Do you have any?
Well, I don't have any. I will react to Justice Janet's observation and concerns. I think they're very legitimate. Look, you can have a constitution all you want, and other countries who, according to the justice, signed onto this particular protocol also have their own constitutions. You can have a constitution and then sign a central protocol, ratify a protocol, domesticate that protocol. It doesn't mean that it necessarily contravenes your constitution. What I heard the justice say, and which I agree, is to exude confidence. Is for the peace and stability of the country. You want to conduct. By the way, elections are tools of stabilization as well. Elections can be destructive. They can stabilize a country. They can lead a country to a better place where the country makes progress. That's why people put themselves forward, and the electoral management body has to be an institution that is well respected. So, Mr. Gonglo, you're cross-firing here as to, whether the legislature has ratified this or that. It's good. I take it the president, the justice just said, has the appointing authority on our laws. Granted, that's not in dispute. Well, the point I'm hearing is the election commission has to be one which enjoys the confidence, the trust of the Liberian people of all communities, in the opposition, in the incumbent administration, civil society, religious community. All Liberian citizens ought to be able to look at this commission and say, you know what, this is my National Election Commission. I will respect the results they will put out. I respect the processes that they're prosecuting in order for the elections to be free, fair, and transparent. That's what I'm hearing. And if we've signed and ratified that particular protocol, I think it wouldn't behooves our government to ensure that we respect that. Otherwise, you will ask the question, why, when you're having an election, you have international observers, you have local observers, and all these people coming. One final point I will make and shut up is your question about Ambassador McCarthy. Said that election commission is credible because they've conducted 2 by-elections and the opposition won. Okay, look, I respect the Americans. I sit in the United States, but we're talking about okay, Liberian citizens like you, like Justice Jania, like Dennis, like Sharif and Kane and Dukule, who are questioning these things, are asking. It is for us to say we trust our election commission because, and give our reasons, right? And Americans can say we trust it, and the Kenyans come and say we trust it. What if we don't trust it? We don't find it credible based on how it's composed.
Thank you. Let me go to Dr. Dukle. Dr. Dukle, to Gonglo's point, the election, even though there was a lot of noise when they were starting the process, even the census, the voter registration, but at the end of it, I think a lot of people gave them some high marks, and some saw that. So, and just the last one was the U.S. ambassador, the people we always listen to when he says something. So, to our surprise, or to the surprise of many, of some, the election commission continued to enjoy, say, you guys are doing well. So we may be shocked and surprised at a time when elections are conducted before people start crying foul. It'll be too late, right? So what you make of these, high marks that the election commission is getting? I mean, apart from Councillor Janet.
High marks, I don't know. You're talking about the ambassador getting
The ambassador, and then there was this group, Lamotte. I think two other groups said, the BVR, the conduct of the census and all that was okay.
It's hard to, paint these things and say, oh, they're credible, they're not. They say they ran 2 successive by-elections and then the opposition won. Well, George Weah was now on a ticket. So there was no danger for the government. There were just 2 seats. They could lose them and win them. Whoever comes into the Senate, they can use them anywhere, as they've been doing with everybody. So that does not make any difference. So they could say, okay, yes, to establish our credibility, we found 26,000 double registration. We're doing this. We made the government to accept to lose 2 seats in the last 2 by-elections. So therefore, we're credible. So you build up your own credibility till you get to your big issue, which is the presidential election. How they're going to, do that is the question. It's not a matter of what they did with by-elections and all of this. And how much time it took them to do it. And a lot of the issues that have been raised actually by Justice Cabinet and other people in 2017 when he tried to stop the result and go back to a new election, were those things that never happened. Those things that were supposed to happen in the election commission in terms of electoral processes and all of that were not done in Liberia. And ECOWAS came and made recommendations that were not followed. But we still went to elections. We still got the President George Weah. So I would say I reserve my judgment for the last minute when they come to ballot and say, here are the ballots. But then again, it's not so much to the commission to do that. It's up to the opposition to make sure that they cannot steal the elections. Because if you have somebody in every polling station signing every data that comes up that polling station and is sent to you people, nobody can steal your election. But if you sit home and say, well, we can trust the election, no, we're not going to send somebody to Butro is too far from Monrovia, this and that, and then you get the result that you want. It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of making sure they do their job. I don't say somebody should give flowers to somebody who has not done their job yet. They haven't done it yet. They're still preparing for the elections. So I want to see the result of the election, the day after the elections, and how people will react, and then we can tell, yes, they're credible or they're not. But now at this point, I reserve my judgment. I'm saying, hey, okay, you did 2. How did it go? Baka could have contested the local elections. They could have. People wanted to contest their elections, that it was not free and fair. But UP said, no, let it go. And told Kotuma, you run next time. We make sure you win next time. So, we have this bygone, let's bygone be bygone, So we don't follow the laws. When did Liberian men follow the law? Do we really care? Because we look at election laws and what is happening now is totally different. Nobody's saying anything. Councillor, Justice Cabinet talking about the election commission composition and the people who are in there, but they've been there for 2-3 years. Who's going to change them now for 3 months before the elections? Nothing. It's not going to happen. So we have them. They're going to run the election, either we like it or not. So how they proceed, what will be the results, the outcome is up in the air. But I will not say, oh yeah, they're good or they're bad. No, I'm just saying I want to see them run that presidential election with the House elections and all of that. Because running one little election in Lofa and one in Nimba doesn't say much about your capacities. It just says that yeah, you can run and you can count ballots, but that's it.
Thank you. Mohammed, I want you to be the last on the election issue. Any comment about generally looking at the elections? One time I made a analogy that you can wait until the referee, say, come in my yard to play, no substitute for you, and then how you look at this whole the running of the conduct of the election as we go to 2023 October 10 on both sides, both opposition and incumbent, and then the election commission. Where you think we're heading? You're muted, sir.
So I think Ahmed on that issue made some very excellent, make excellent exposition on that. But I want to go back before I come to the whole issue of election. One of the things that I know about Liberia is that we sweep things under the rug. I used to know a time where journalism was active, and so if right now if you have the kind of journalists that I think we should have, there are a lot of things that have been swept under the rug, and we're saying let's just move on. We just had a man who implicated himself in a pay-to-play. I don't care if it's constitutional, if it's legal or not, but morally it's wrong. So people should be outraged. There should be investigation into this. He just implicated himself in a pay-to-play. So even if his candidate is not involved in this, but where are the journalists who are investigating these things? Where are the journalists who investigated George Weah when one of his supporters came out to say that there was pay-to-play as well? So pay-to-play is all over the place. We have Justice Janet right here. Justice Janet was impeached I would say unjustly impeached, and some of the things that we heard was that there was pay to play. There were people, opposition people who were bought by the ruling CDC. So it is legitimate. We have to investigate these things. We cannot sweep them under the rug. There has to be people who are willing to step up to investigate these things. So talking about it now, I think it's a good thing. And you're talking about it in the context of someone who implicated himself. I think you have been very careful, Dennis, and that's where we all should remain very careful in terms of not implicating people, because we don't have the evidence. So that's not what we're doing. But what we're doing is that the man who implicated himself said he did. There were attempts to support this campaign with $30 million. And so he said there was all these arrangements. He implicated himself. He didn't see anything wrong with it. I see something wrong with it. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care if it's if it's allowed. But morally, this is wrong. So how is it that, for example, if I'm an investor and I don't have that money to pay right now, what are my chances against a Chinese or a Russian oligarch who's going to come in and pay and take over part of my country? So these are legitimate issues to discuss. So as well as discussing that, the election commission, Justice Janet also said it correctly, the election commission has to be credible. I think Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, he mentioned, that what she did was she included individuals who were even appointed, an individual that he mentioned who was even nominated by George Weah, the current president of the Republic of Liberia. So this is something, has George Weah reciprocated that? Has he done anything that will ensure that the election is going to be credible? I don't think he has done that. And I think that's one of the things that, that needs to happen. Again, no one is talking about these things besides us coming here to discuss them. So people think that, I'm surprised that Gonglo said that, the Americans said that, the elections, they've conducted, the election commission has conducted two credible elections, right? The same Americans said back in 1985 that it was okay that, the civilianized military was able to win, quote unquote, win the election. So we have to take these things, when the Americans say it, with a grain of salt. So it's good that we're talking about it, Dennis. It's I have my concerns going forward. So now, if it's not brought up now, if these things are not challenged now, October will be too late to challenge them.
Dennis, if I may just say something quickly.
Go ahead, Calabo. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, sorry. Listen, this is just funny. We are part of Committee of Nations. The way we even give validation to what we do on election is to have international observers come here, come there in any country and give a stamp of approval that, oh, this happened. That is not, no electoral process is perfect. I've been international observer up twice. No electoral process is perfect. That's one. When you want to, even just to collect data, just for evaluation, there are two data points. There has been two by-elections, right? Of course, this commission was constituted after 2017. So the only thing they had to do was a by-election. They've done two of that. Opposition won in most of the two. Okay? So what else do you look for? I mean, what is even funny to me is for my big brother Duke to say only 2023 October 10 election, the result we gave him the data point now to evaluate the elections commission. It seems to me that he had a particular predictable outcome in his head. If it doesn't happen, then you evaluate. It seems to me like a presidential candidate in this election, Ambassador Bwaga, who said you will fight corruption when he is elected, but he refused to be audited when he was vice president, right? So, I mean, you can take it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but if I said that,
let me please make a point.
No, let Dr. Douglas respond first because he called his name.
I think, Gonglo, you got my point, but you need on the wrong side of the road. I'm just saying it's 2 months to elections. We can raise all the issues now. Nobody's going to take this election commission to court. Nobody's going to dismantle that election commission, and they're not going to change their ways. So you can do nothing. All you have to do, mount your team to work and be hard working on the ground. That's all. That's what I'm saying. We can judge all you want. Maybe 2 years ago, we know the relationship between some of the members of the commission and some members of the government, high-level people in the government. We all know who girlfriend who's. But those issues should be raised when they're being confirmed. When they were being confirmed, not now. That's what I'm trying to say. When they're being confirmed, say, you know what, we know you and this person.
Can I jump in there?
Huh? Yeah, jump in, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Janet, jump in.
Those who have done some critical analysis of the Liberian situation leading to the violent conflict say to us that one of the root causes was stealing of election. What had just happened in Sierra Leone is scary. If we say we can't talk about particularly the composition of the election commission at this hour because it's too late, I don't know what exactly we'll be doing after the election. The same running around with complaints. I pick up from my brother Gonglo that the president has all of this authority. You know very well that one of the problems we have had in Liberia is that the pervasive executive authority vested in the person of the president. You know that. There were a lot of discussion as to the composition of the election commission after the 2017 election, when President Weah had the opportunity to reconstitute it. You know what happened in the Senate. All this discussion went on, and because of the kind of authority the kind of powers the president has, all of those people that were nominated were confirmed by the very Senate. We are just saying here that if we want to proceed with this election, there's a need to take a fresh look at those who are going to be responsible for overseeing this election. And these are the commissioners. And the earlier we do that, the better, so that we can have a repeat of something like what we just saw in Sierra Leone.
Right. You keep making reference to Sierra Leone. You say it's scary. How so? What's scary about the Sierra Leone elections? Marabio won in the first round with 56%. Do you know something that we don't know, Councillor Johnny?
Well, after the election results were announced, the first thing the opposition did was to issue this statement, of course, calling for the resignation of the electoral board, all of the members, I guess, and then few other demands. Why now? That be my issue. Why we can't start to talk about these things now? We should wait until after, then we run to a Supreme Court that my better Gonglo just say is a mere extension of the executive authority.
Right.
But what can be done?
Interestingly, recently, one of the sitting justices was invited to a forum where she said, look, don't sit here. There are a lot of issues that need to be looked into. Don't stay here and do nothing, and then at the end of the day, you run to the court. What do you want the court to do? This was a sitting justice making this. Somebody has been vested with authority to do this thing, therefore we should get leave, and then that's fine. But I think this is a matter of grave concern to me as a Liberian citizen, that unless we begin to do some serious discussion about these things, we may run into problems.
Thank you.
I'm just asking a question. What can you do with the commission in terms of the people, not the issues that have to be resolved? Like, I think you were referring to Wolcoli, who said that 2-3 weeks ago that opposition parties are sitting down, they're not doing anything. And I think there are a lot of issues that were raised by ECOWAS and that were raised by you back in 2017. Those issues are still there. But do you think we can do something with the commission as, talking about the people, or the issues that were there that were not resolved?
Dr. Du?
Because I don't see how we can change the commission now.
Well, I think something can be done first.
We should do nothing? Dr. Du,
exactly.
You say nothing can be done? Is that what
I think,
go ahead,
I think a lot of things can be done.
Okay.
I think a lot of things can be done. We need to say to the government, and I'm speaking to political parties, to say, you need to return to the ECOWAS protocol that requires that you have people on the commission that also will inspire the confidence of the opposition community, as it has of Mr. Selig. And if the government doesn't listen, we can take up this matter up to the ECOWAS code. I know somebody will say, well, the ECOWAS code wouldn't do anything. Well, I believe that that's the route we need to take, and then supported by a series of political actions.
Councillor
And
John,
I'm sure
do you think the opposition care about
very
it?
well when I say series.
Does the opposition care to do that? I think that's why Dr. Douglas is throwing his hands in the air and say, we can do nothing about this.
Let's hear from Connor. He's a technician who was on the ground with you.
That's a political question, enough of technician.
Thomas, you think the opposition political parties do they care? Do they know? Or they're waiting to close the to build the fence after the groundhog finished destroying the rice?
Well, in the 2011 elections, I worked on a project that supported the Elections Commission. One thing I can say is that at the technical level, there is capacity in that commission. People have been trained from 2005 to 2011 to 2017 on the mechanics of conducting the elections. People have a lot of knowledge. And one improvement that has been done on the electoral process in Liberia is this transmission of votes. So once the voting takes place, they do the counting, they do the tally, and they post it on the wall. They then aggregate them at tally centers. So they're not bringing everything down to Monrovia. So if you are able to monitor the elections from the polls onto the tally center to the results that come to town, you are very confident that that what the Election Commission announces in Monrovia should be what you saw on the ground. And one thing that has also improved is the issue of civil society participation. You have there's a election coordinating committee, the ECC. There's another one called, I think, NEW. They are all active. We're also going to have external voter, international observers that will observe the election. But all of these things don't solve the core problems. Sarah Leon, I think one of the things I've heard was the issue of the election result that was announced. People say it wasn't disaggregated. So it's like it was aggregated and say, BO won this 1,000 or this million in this district, but it was not disaggregated to the polling level. In Nigeria, the problem was that the Election Commission said they were going to announce these results electronically. So people were sitting to watch the results come in, but they did not come in. So the point I'm making is that there could be technical capacity to conduct the actual elections, but yet there could be some other issues that can affect even that technical capacity from performing to give the output that they actually have in-house. So I think it then comes to the policy level in terms of decision making. And this is where I agree with the councillor that the composition was done right after the elections. Many people in the Senate, when you listen to them today, they say, okay, at that point, we wanted to give the president chance. So give him chance. And many of the appointments were made. But I think discussing these things now will put some kind of spotlight on the Election Commission, especially at the policy level, so that they know that people are watching, so that they don't do anything that can be that violates the laws that we have in place. And on the issue of the two by-elections that were won, yes, there are two by-elections that were won by DeLong in the CDC stronghold, but there were also some elections that were controversial. The District 15 election, they had to go back to conducting some of the to conduct the election in some of the polling places. In Lofa, like somebody said, Unity Party decided not to go. So there are all of these issues. And for me, one of the other issues I see is that civic education, I don't think is really robust in these elections. And then the issue of even political parties, you go to Monrovia, they are all of their banners around town when campaign has not started. So the point he was making for political parties to pay attention to it and to be able to go back to these protocols to see whether Liberia really signed, if there are issues that they can highlight from there before the elections, I think it's a valid point because this is really huge. This is the presidential plus all of the representative elections. We need to make sure that we go into it, making sure we cross all the I's and actually dot all of the T's.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is Tough Talking Thursday, and we are having a general discussion on the current state of affairs of the country. Mr. Thomas Kane, the election technician, has Mr. Salim described, has a concern. And let me play a tape here, and then we'll go into it.
For their part, the PPCC submitted also a matrix. And this matrix is entitled the Ministry of Public Works Prior Approved Road and Other Related Projects for fiscal year 2018-2019 to present. We have referred to this report as Exhibit B. During the oral testimonies by the minister, The minister and her staff or people were always punctuated by senators on account of inconsistencies, contradictions, and to what some senators term as falsehood. Particularly the officials of the ministry made reference to 2 segments of the road are broad out road.
Of the public works minister in the Senate, and talking about the state of affairs, Mr. Connor had concerns about the appearance and what went down in the Senate with the public works minister. Thomas.
So, Dennis, this goes back to where we started the whole conversation around corruption. Essentially, corruption is the use of public resources for private gain. Any dollar or penny that belongs to the public sector that needs to deliver service to people, to the people who are the taxpayers, when somebody takes a penny of that resource and use it for their personal interest, that's essentially corruption. I'm not saying this is what has happened because the Senate is still investigating. But a broader issue I want to highlight is that the only way you fight corruption is to fight corruption through institutions. And institutions are necessarily not buildings where people work, like the PPCC building, the LACC building. These are your laws and regulations. When you put them down, you need to follow them. And this is why after the Civil War, when it was identified that, marginalization, exclusion, and all of that corruption was the reason why we fought war, the government started to build the architecture to improve governance. This is how all these institutions came on board, the PPCC, LACC, and everything. We had the code of conduct. We all remember it took a lot of time to be able to pass them, essentially to be able to fight this issue of corruption. So if you follow these hearings, much of what the senators have been saying in the Senate is that the public work has signed some contracts with some companies and gave them contracts to be able to maintain our roads either in the southeast or lower, up to $250 million, almost 300,000. And some of these companies have taken 20% of the payment and they've not even gone to put one rack on the road. And it's also said that some of these companies are owned by lawmakers themselves. So it's essentially we pass the national budget and then they have these shadow companies registered and the companies get the contract and they don't do the work. And the Ministry of Public Works is afraid to really pull them down because the point is if you pull them and they are in authority to allocate resources through the national budget, you're not going to get it. So I think the bottom line here is that once there is corruption, it affects development in all other sectors. You know, in 2013, when the MCC did the constraint analysis for Liberia, roads and electricity, they were our major constraints. But with corruption, you cannot even build roads because you allocate the resources, the roads don't get built. With corruption, there will be problem in electricity, power theft, and a lot of these other issues. So I think this was something that was really concerning. They almost sent the whole public works ministry team to jail. They are under contempt. I think they have to go back on, they have to submit their report on Monday and then go back for the contempt hearing on Tuesday. Essentially, they even lied on the oath. When some of the senators say this road is very bad, they say, oh, but we gave the contract. The people said they made the road is perfect. So I think this is essentially a symptom of a complete breakdown of our entire governance architecture that need to protect against these things. So this is really, really concerning.
Dr. Duque.
Yeah.
I wonder why they are talking about this now. It's like, why now? What's going on here? It looked like some of them went to the southeast and the road gave them a hard time, but what's going on?
Well, elections coming. Some people want to be re-elected and they have to make noise to make sure that, hey, I've been talking about this, nobody listen. So it's a campaign team, you go and show a little video, say, what I told these people, when I was there, I told them this is not working, they didn't listen to me. It's just campaign talk. Everything is campaign talk. Even Chambers got, now $200,000 in the budget to build a community college in Plebo. I said, but mama, you got a house there. They pave you road. People pave you road. The only road paved on the side of, the main road in Plebo is your house. And you didn't think about a college then, but now 3 months before the election, you think about building a college. So it's all the same campaign talk. I won't pay attention to it. Anything that comes from government or anybody else running for things is a campaign talk. You got it doesn't hold water, you got no bottom to it, so just let it go.
Dr. Douglas, you have no faith in the system.
Huh?
You have no faith in the system. It's like, what's going on here? I mean,
Well,
the election, you said we can't do anything now. You say it's campaign talk.
No, it's campaign talk. What are you going to do? The guy come up and say, yesterday somebody was talking about the Minister of Finance saying ADB has agreed to do the Southeast Road. I mean, the coastal road for $400 some million. And it happened to be not true. So what are you going to do? Sue him? Take him to court? Everybody on the campaign their own way. Some people lie, some people give candy, some people give rice, some people give t-shirts. And these guys lie. Or they make up stories. So it's not that you can do nothing, you can counter it, but how far are you going to go with it? I think what will happen is that, talking about it's late, is that we don't take things when we were supposed to take them. We just wait till the moment of crisis. And we are in a moment of crisis. A lot of, I wrote pieces about the election commission. I wrote things about this a year ago, 2 years ago, share it with the political leaders. I say, you guys have to pay attention to this thing. 2-3 years ago, nobody up to now, not a single one responded to me on those issues. I raised this issue 2-3 years ago. And, and then now you come 3 months before the election, and you panic. It's like child play. It's not that you can't do nothing about it. You should have done it 2 years ago. You should have stand in the way of appointing these people at the National Election Commission. Stop them. Nobody said anything. They just sat down. They went through G5, boom, and they got elected. They got, they sat there and then they got the money and they do what they want to do. And then we discovered them 3 months before the elections. Are you serious? Maybe I don't sound serious, but you have people for 4 years in office, 5 years. You know their character, you know their personality, you know their contact in the government. And you sit down, you say nothing. And then 3 months before the election, say, oh, we got to look at these people. My man, this is going to be bad. So what I'm going to say to you, okay, just wait. Just wait. Because you've been waiting 3 years, 5 years. The opposition party have been fighting each other for 5 years. They spent all their energy to see who's going to be the top dog in opposition. Who's going to beat who? Who's going to humiliate who? Who's going to push who? Who's going to put in the jail and all of that? Who's going to make sure that somebody is barred from running? Instead of looking at the election commission, instead of looking at election processes, instead of looking at all these issues and sit down and say, oh, we're not doing it. And now, and they're not even talking. You and I are talking about it. They're not talking about it. Yeah. Have you seen any politician talk about any of these issues? They don't care.
I thought, do you politician? Ahmed.
I'm not a politician. I'm a teacher.
Mr. Salim, what's going on here? Because true to Dr. Douglas' point, okay, now it's like the boy who lives with you, and you can't even afford to go to the school you send, and you see them with private car, you see them with bling bling, and you're not saying anything, right? So we know of Tamafala University. They are building roads. They have George Kuhn Hospital, Prince Johnson University. People are, someone who makes he gets a salary is building road. They have these trucks, fire truck, this thing, and we say nothing, right? Because everybody is saying, maybe I'm going to win tomorrow, and then I may do the same thing. So now, what's going on here? And also the individual we have as a people. Why is it that citizens, voters, are not calling attention to these kind of things and wait until it's almost we have less than 4 months to election? And what's going on here? Is it education? Is it laissez-faire attitude? Is it like you either eat or I'm waiting my turn to eat too? What's going on?
The multiple layers. You're trying to peel the onion there, Dennis. On the one level, where to your last point, what's going on the individual level, whether it's a society, I think the way I see these things is because we're disorganized, is inherent in our behavior. We lack systematization, So, for instance, how you run your campaign is it's a system. Okay, same thing how you run an election. They're trying at the election commission, but there are a number of issues. Uh, the core issue we were discussing the symptoms, right? So somebody did census some haphazard way, we didn't resolve that. Then we went to BVR, biometric voter registration. We didn't resolve that, and then now we're saying, oh, there are these other issues of the members of the commission itself. And then the technician on our show said, well, the technical level, the people have received all kinds of training, external support, they've gained and garnered experience, and therefore they know what they're doing, right? So that's good. But some of the problems that we see day in, day out is because we don't stop to look at our what we do as a way of sort of as a matter of system, and therefore following them to the nitty gritty details. Okay, so for instance, civil society people are there. They're supported by international organizations, donors, and funders come in and say, "Hey, you're the watchdog here. You're in the media. You have to make noise." And they try to do this. They get a little funding here. They do something. They do, but they're now having traction and impact because of the way it's done in a haphazard way. On the abuse and waste and corruption side, we call all of that corruption. Of course, we know these people can't afford these things. They're building big hospitals, big universities that will cost you several $1 million. And the president doesn't have some kind of holdings in the country, some company, we don't have these things, right? Countries like Nigeria and Kenya and so on, yes, they're corrupt, but they also have a vibrant private sector where one individual can be in government, but they made their money before coming to government. Therefore, there's no question. Of course, you don't want them to commingle the public funds and their private funds, but we can trace sources of the funds in our country. People become wealthy, really wealthy, when they get in government. If they want to crown their wealth, whatever little business they were doing, they come to government, then they amplify from there. They say, well, this person got several hospitals, the one of the richest persons in the country, and therefore we want to give them more power. Okay? That's how we do it. We don't track these things because we're not organized. We don't systematize. Therefore, we don't follow the rules and the legal framework we put in place. All kinds of things are happening, Dennis. Meaning, if you ask me, some of it is education from basic grassroots level throughout, and build our system in such a way that people are disciplined. People can set up systems and follow it. On the government side, the same thing. If you don't systematize and don't follow procedures to the letter and hold people accountable, anybody can get away with anything. And so we see these things displaying in some of the public events and ventures that we undertake, such as elections.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif, Honor President Doe, I mean, some of these things used to make Doe angry, right? At some point, whether it was true or false, that they were doing it for real, he was beating officials publicly for stealing, right? Come to even during the Charles Taylor days, as we heard the stories, he would get really mad if some of his officials were corrupt. I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir, but come to President Weah. I mean, we hear like nothing, like anything serious that is really getting him upset when he hears some of these things. We don't hear that.
Dennis, President George Weah does not go to bed, and not a single day that he loses sleep over what is going on. He doesn't lose sleep over this. He doesn't care. He watches these shows. His people watch these shows, and what is the Liberian way of saying it? Don't mind God, man. They're jealous. So that is what's going on. But quickly going back to Doe. So you mentioned, the Doe administration. What has happened with Liberia is we saw a degeneration, and perhaps Dr. Duglo will speak to this better than I. But you saw a degeneration from this, and I'm talking, in terms of fiscally speaking, from the 70s as you get to the 80s, and after the coup there was a complete degeneration of society, and so corruption became fashionable. And yes, you heard that, but at the same time, I don't know if you remember the case of Deputy Police Director Samuel Massaquoi, who was probably, I think, was arrested, and Mr. Doe said, he who has never let those who, something along the line of, if you live in a glass house, don't throw a stone. And he quoted something that Jesus said. I forgot what it was now.
I've
But
never seen or something.
don't challenge the police office, don't challenge the entire police force to come up with 3 people. I think he said 3 people who were not corrupt. He said, show me 3 people. If he said this guy is corrupt, he did this and this and that and the other, show me 3 people that are not corrupt. And I think because the police force, the deadline he gave them, police force could not come up with that, which no one can go to the president and say, Mr. President, I'm going to prove you wrong, which, no one did that. So Samuel Massaquoi was set free by the president, and so there you go. So it was not totally the case that he was fighting corruption. What had happened at some point was that the Americans, got involved with him, because now the Reagan administration in the early days of the George H.W. Bush's administration were getting tough with him, and so what happened was, though, now you remember again when he went out to say we're going to pay the Americans, and so it was as a result of all of those pressures. So what I'm saying here is that these things didn't start with George Weah. So George Weah is building on what already started way back then, but George Weah has taken it to another level. So if you coalesce, incompetence with the proclivity to be very, very corrupt, you have this sort of a dangerous mixture. George Weah, when he came to the presidency, he was broke. By his own admission, he had nothing, and now this is the wealthiest man in Liberia. He's probably one of the wealthiest presidents in West Africa, and so that is inexcusable. If that is inexcusable, you look at the legislature; those guys are very, very, very rich, and they were nothing. And Ahmed said it correctly, and now they become somebody. And so even they, with all of the private companies, all of the private universities, all of the private hospitals that they're building, it may be legal, but is it ethical? Is it moral? So they are fleecing the country. As a result, the country remains poor, and they have to beg for money. They have to borrow. They continue to borrow. They will continue to pile debt. And this is the thing that I think the opposition needs to speak to, that I think the opposition needs to be prepared as a government in waiting to change. I don't have hope that the opposition can change these things, because they're not even discussing these things. Dennis, finally, uh, I think that one of the solutions to this, and maybe that's going to be one of your questions tonight, hopefully, one of the solutions I see to this is the regularity of election. I believe that the alteration of power through regular elections. If these guys were only sitting there for 2 years, if you had a Thomas Fowler who's who knows that in the next 2 years he'll be booted out, he might be careful. But we don't have that. We have guys sitting there for 6 years. We have guys sitting there for 9 years. This is too long. And so, yes, they do those things because they know that they can sit there forever and ever and ever. If Thomas Fowler goes for another term, if he doesn't win the Senate, he goes for another term, that's 12 years. Another third term, that's 18 years. For the senators, forget it. And so there has to be regular election. There has to be a time where the opposition can agree. Again, it was the opposition that campaigned against when George Weah proposed a reduction in presidential term. So who are these people? So I condemn the opposition for that. Alexander Cummings, these guys campaigned against
DeLong was one of them.
Dillon. But Cummings was the CPP chair at the time. He was the CPP chair. He never, there was never an effort to support the administration. It's not all the time that you can oppose the administration. There are some things that you can work with the administration if your interest is at stake. So they should have worked with George Weah at that time to at least reduce the presidential term. They did not. They suspected that George Weah was going to succeed himself. George wasn't going to succeed himself. So if George Weah tries to do that, the opposition should let him know that we have the number. We can do something about it also. But they did not. They didn't support that effort. And now the reason why I think they didn't support that effort is because their own interest was at stake. The opposition needed to support that. And so, again, they had to start from somewhere. As long as that's not happening, I don't have any hope for Liberia, even with the opposition. I don't know. I don't even know what the opposition is trying to do, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Talking about the opposition, I want to bring on Mr. Calebo Gonglo, who's coincidentally his brother is running. And if we talk about some of these things that we are talking about, who's a better person to be able to take the issue to the people than the Councillor Gonglo? For instance, most of these things are legal, right? So there's a high expectation from Councillor Gonglo to take these issues on, even if it means going to the Supreme Court.
Well, Dennis, I will say this. Currently, so far on the list of those qualified presidential candidates by NEC, Councillor Gonglo is the only candidate that has a legal established credential in law, in the practice of law.
That's why we expect a lot from him.
And if he goes on to win, he will be probably the only president in the Second Republic to have a degree in law. Okay, he will be the only president. I understand Thurman was, a lawyer. I don't know if he had a degree in law. I may speak to that, but he will be the only person with a degree in law to be president of Liberia. And I think lawyers lead nation differently. So more than that, Councillor Gonglo has the courage. He's proven that when he was Solicitor General, I don't need to go into that. He worked with Dr. Du in Sawyer government, and
I'm talking about taking these current issues on and going as far as the Supreme Court.
No, but no. So, maybe Ahmed will come to that. The system, our legal system, as I understand, is adversarial, and sometimes there is a culture, there is an interpretation of the law by the Supreme Court. I would say
you should be impacted.
The corporate bench, or probably the bench before him, they had this thing say standing under the law. I mean, you're standing up. What is your standing? Right. So I think they've used that broadly. Liberia has different definition for what is standing compared to the ECOWAS code, because most people who've lost case at the Supreme Court in Monrovia on the basis of not having standing, when they go to the ECOWAS code, they win. They won. The ECOWAS code will say you do have standing. Okay. So, but Liberia has different definition, different legal definition of what standing is in the law. But that's besides the case. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to dwell on that.
And I understand a little bit of that standing. So you're saying so all these things we're talking, the councillor may not have standing if you want to challenge like the composition of the election commission, all that.
You don't know, because there's no law really that you can take that. That's the power of the president. If the president decides that, okay, I can, then work with Dr. Sawyer probably introduced that culture. At first, it was a difficult time. What Sawyer would do was he started contact the Bar Association. That's how Francis Johnson Morris became Chief Justice. He will go to the bar and say, the bar should nominate respected person to be this, to be that. He started that culture. Okay, so he decided that he will go that route, but he doesn't have to. Okay, a given president in Liberia does not have to. There's no legal requirement for that person to do it. You can decide to choose to do it. It's up to you. It's your leadership style. Okay, so that's not even what I want to talk on. I want to just pick on some of the points Drew made earlier and what Mohammed said. Liberia, any country that is governed by the rule of impunity is a troubled nation. So is Liberia. Liberia is governed by the rule of impunity, and it has been so for centuries. And we Liberians generally, both the uneducated, functional illiterate, the educated, we all don't love this country. The legislature is not only the problem in Liberia, the Liberian nation is the problem. Liberians are the problem because they elect the people going in the legislature. The very legislature, we sit on the show, we all identify that over and over, corruption is number one problem in Liberia. What do? Individually, we support people who have no courage to fight corruption. I bet you if Councillor Gonglo was vice president for 12 years, the legislature, he would have been audited. He would have prevailed over the Senate to say, let's submit ourselves to audit. Look at the recent statement by the U.S. ambassador. Over $90 million of our budget is spent on the legislature, but that is representing more than 11% of the national budget. That legislature has never been audited from 2006 to present. But people from the legislature, if you count individuals who own universities and technical schools in Liberia, probably 90% or 95% of them come from the legislature. What does that say to you? They never owned any school building before they got elected. What does that say? But guess what? That's the people other support. That's the people, the young people who feature have been stored in the room by these people are the very people who get in that. I said to one of my friends this morning, we were in the chat, I said, you know what? The problem that is happening to Liberia is, I can describe it this way. If you have a woman who has never known love, who is in a very abusive home, the husband beats, insults her every moment. Even when you see a good guy comes around, you don't know the difference between good and bad. You reject that good man. That's what is happening to Liberia, a nation that has been abused by the rule of impunity. When they got a good guy, the Councillor Chawan Gonglo with the courage to solve that problem, they don't even know that they are on their way to heaven. They don't even know. And that is what is happening. And it is so paradoxical that we try to protect people who serve in the legislature, who serve in the highest elected office, and never fought to be audited. When I look at Waima Kamara report, the office of the vice president received 37% of our budget, received 6.5 million in compensation.
Wow.
For 12 years, was never audited. But he talks about what? You fight corruption. And people clap. Are we living on Pluto?
Sam Wallow said he was audited. He said VP Walker was audited.
Sam Wallow, I live and taught Liberian issue. I bench like that since 1988. What are you talking about?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Talking Thursday. If you want to join the conversation.
In everything. I know what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Gonglo. If you want to join the conversation, please dial 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. That's the number to call. And Dr. Douglas, before you come on, I want to announce that tomorrow, of Saturday at 1 p.m., I'm going to be having an exclusive interview with the rescue entity. That's Madame Magdala Cooper. She's the vice chair for fundraising, the newly formulated, they say, proposed, there's a way to describe the campaign committee of Joseph Newman Boakai. She's the fundraising chair and the vice chair for fundraising, and she's called the rescue entity. You have the rescue mother, you have the so now we have the rescue entity. She'll be here to talk about her decision to support JNB And all the things coming down in the Unity Party, we want Madam Cooper to speak to us here. That's Saturday. You know what I mean?
Jonas, may I intrude on this? Can I volunteer to share the panel with you to interview her?
No, I'm sorry. But you have to. I have to. We have to
one of those people. You know, there's a woman who sat on spoon and said Boakai is old to solve the problem in Liberia.
Hey man,
I want to sit on that panel.
Dr. Brooklyn, you
But just send a question to Jonas.
I like your passion. I like your passion tonight. Really, I
We
do.
have
No, Gongo is on fire today.
The Joe Biden said this
Gongo is the
election
best
is about
tonight.
the soul of the country. I've said it many times. If we lose 2023, we are on our way to Haiti. 2023 is a ticket to Haiti. We have to fight.
You know, when you talk about corruption, we talk about corruption, why it's so systemic, and people don't really care about it. We forget one aspect of it. That is 1980. The transition of power that happened in 1980 had very deep consequences that we don't still think about. Because people who were sitting on the outside were never part of the government, were only government as, from its trappings, the benefits the people got, cars and money, the impression they got from outside. And then once they got to power in 1980, that's what they did. We've been exploited, humiliated for 160 years. So this is what we're going to do. So their understanding of power was the trappings of power. It was not about the responsibility. Either you like it or not, people who were in power in 1980 were from generations of people who create that state. They created a state with its own laws to meet their needs. That's why, some of the things we live are very small. University of Liberia is a small campus. St. Patrick is a small campus. St. Teresa's Convent is a small thing. So all these things were made to correspond to the needs of a small political class. All of a sudden, in 1980, you have a group of people who have never been part of the political process, who have seen the government from outside, and came in and said, now is our turn. It's our time to eat. Like Mrs. Taylor said. So corruption becomes natural. Yeah, we've been exploited for 130 years. All they know about government, all they know about Liberian government, the Republic of Liberia, is the oppression, the humiliation, and then what they call, being kept outside. So now that, just imagine, the days the slaves were liberated in the US. You take all those slaves and say, okay, now you got a country. You have the White House, run it as you want. What do they know about power? What do they know about the Republic of Liberia? They didn't know. So the few people who were, integrated in that system were also kicked out. The people who were trying to make a smooth change, a smooth transition to a new democratic process, the Sawyer, the Bacchus Matthew, and Tipota, all of those people, they fell off the train. They kicked them off the train. They couldn't do anything. So you get the power in the hands of people who have never experienced power, who don't know what the republic means, all they know, you have a Mercedes, you have a big mansion, and you can eat, and you get a big gut, and you're in power. That's what happened. So we're still dealing with that phenomenon. That transition has not fully, materialized in our head. That say, what is the state? Who created Liberia? Who created the Republic of Liberia? Forget about people not voting in it, but it was created by a group of people for their needs, with their own rules, their own morals, and their own ethics. They were not as corrupt as people thought they were. The political power was corrupt, but that is what we're living with. And it's going to continue till there's a big transition at some point where somebody say, okay, now, you know what? We're going to move from this point. Gongo is good. You can talk about it, but it goes into a thing, like Mabudu said, hey, you bring the Queen of England to Zaire, she'll be more corrupt than me. And you take me to London, I'll be the best king in the world. It's your system you have. We have a system that we don't control. Mentally, none of the people now running the political system in Liberia, their grandfather were never part of the Republic of Liberia. They were not part of the political system. And they will never sat down. And then we don't study what is a republic. So we have to get that in our mind that, it is not the way we see corruption. It's a culture. It's endemic. It's part of the nation bloodline. Because people say we've been exploited for 130 years. Now we have power. We're going to do our own. And everybody's in the boat. Everybody in the same boat. Everybody's going to be corrupt, including Gongolo when you get to the mansion.
And so Dennis, if I can just make a point, I think that is the core of where we are as a country. Liberia, essentially, the state itself was created on that basis of extraction. You extract from outside to feed the bureaucracy that sat in Monrovia. And like that said, even after this transition of power, we've not managed to actually say, okay, we were exploited along with every other person that is out there. And therefore, when we have this opportunity, this is the time for us to get them out of poverty. Everybody comes to power, take power, and repeat exactly what the people who we think exploited us did. So there's really not any change. And it becomes difficult to be able to even fight the system now because it's us fighting ourselves. The same people who go to earlier and let all the cadre training, some of them in the government, some of them out. Everybody knows the next person tactics, and we're just fighting among ourselves. So nothing has changed. I mean, earlier the point was made about Samuel Doe, but if you also look at his regime, he was excessively corrupt. By 1987, he had to come to the U.S. asking for support. There was an entire project to go and rebuild the public financial management system of Liberia. The project never ended. They threw the consultants out. They were at the Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, trying to build the PFM system of Liberia. It never worked. So it has always been this extraction. Can you imagine even these elections that we are going through? Nobody is talking about how do we re-engineer our bureaucracy? How do we decentralize? And even just give voice to these people in Lofa and Bakolo and other places. Nobody is talking about it. So it's just that same vehicle. You get in there, you drive and go to where you want to go. So this is a really complex state that we inherited, and if we can re-engineer it, we'll continue to talk this for many generations to come.
At this point, let me bring in a few callers to add their take. Callers, you have less than a minute each, so we can close under 9 minutes. Let me bring in Mr. Evans Morris, very regular caller. Evans, we appreciate your time. You're live.
Thank you, Mr. John. And hello to the panelists. I hope you're getting me.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. And I just wanted to touch on the corruption issue first, quickly. With corruption, I think, like I said, we've had, the lowest form of corruption there is, whether it's misappropriation or embezzlement. That's quite simple for everybody to see. And I think we can't completely eradicate corruption, even if we somehow are able to contain the petty corruption of stealing from the government. You then graduate into special interests, where you get lobbyists, people who worked in government before become lobbyists, like what we see in the United States, have unfettered access to our elected officials, can petition them to support certain interests, and they're getting paid by those companies or people that represent those companies in order to lobby. That's a form of corruption. It's just a more sophisticated form of corruption. What we have here in the United States, where these people then would give to these people campaign, give them campaign contribution, form special, super PACs for them, and help them to stay in power, perpetually, so to speak. So I think corruption is everywhere. Even in this country, if you look at the lobby system that we have here, it's another form of corruption. And then quickly, when people talk about President Weah, for all the things you can say about him, one of the things you can't say about President Weah is that he has a strong arm on election. He's never been a person who anybody can accuse of cheating or rigging an election ever. So we have to have the president, to say, this man had a history of rigging an election. President Weah had a vested interest in the election of Thomas Fowler, had a vested interest in the elections of Western Philip. And he lost those elections. CDC spent a lot of money. So you're telling me that President Weah lost those elections on purpose, or the NEC went against him, wanted to give him the presidency later on in 2023? Of course not.
Thank
And
you.
then lastly, I wish the former justice was on the call. But somebody who has the legal cachet, who can practice before the Supreme Court in a bench, he could do this pro se and represent the Liberian people and make the case that the NEC is not doing the right thing and they're not constituted correctly, or there's some concerns. And also to you, Mr. Bongo, your brother could do the same thing. He's well learned in the law. If there's any impropriety that he sees with the NEC, he has the capacity to go in there and make his case, and I think he would be heard. So
Thank
I
you.
think the opposition needs to come together and make that case to the Supreme Court if you see anything untoward before elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Evis. Let's be brief. Let me bring on Rosetta Davis. Is that his name?
Is that 7021?
Yes. Your name and where you calling from?
Oh, Francis Davis, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, go ahead, Francis.
I have a quick. All right. I have a quick question for any of the panelists can answer this question. Can a foreigner contribute to a candidate who's running in Liberia of money, to help them to win election or to run the campaign? Any foreigner can do that, or is it against our law?
Probably, but we'll find out.
The reason I'm saying that recently, I don't know if you people discuss this. Costa and even Mr. Boyka, they met with some investors. We don't know who these investors are. They all agree that they met with these people for $30 million. I think it was $30 million.
Mm.
So the question is, who are these investors? Where are they coming from? They're bringing this money, and they already met with these people. So
Right.
if these were foreigners, then what happened? Could these people money be accepted
Right.
into the campaign? That's my question.
Thank you. And we don't know if the story is 100% true. So we say, let's make the assumption that there were people, and that's the question. But thank you. Let's my friend Derek Paul. Mr. Paul, you're live.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity, Dennis. So some time ago, Edward was on his program, and he was talking about all this problem around, African nations, and I wrote that, we are unable to govern ourselves. Some people took offense to that. No, this thing is very serious. What is going on in Africa and Liberia in particular is just so mind-boggling that, we have normalized, immorality, corruption that, this is the 21st century. We are still talking about corruption. And the thing about it is that it's not because, everywhere human beings exist, there will always be, crimes. But, the ability to just prosecute the crime alone, nobody prosecute nothing. You know what I mean? So I heard some of your panelists talking about, the dual government, how they took over power, and, they did not understand, how to govern, and that's true. But Liberia has been, played with people that knew better and refused to do better, and people that did not know better and still refused to do better. And the Johnson government was one of the biggest missed opportunity. And John Molo came out to say that government one of the most corrupt government in the history of Liberia. Why? Because they received the most money. Because it was after war. Everybody was pouring in to come and help that country. And everything is happening. We have government. There's a playbook directly from the Ellen Johnson government. Georgia just took it to another level. Ministers own all the properties in the country. The complete conflict of interest everywhere, all over the place. And, so some of us today we support communists. That's what our last one little hope. That, as a man of principle, and Mr. Gongo, every time we that support communists, we talk about people we're talking to, always include your brother. So please try to include Mr. Communist, because those are the two men of Kentucky that we see right now. If I'm looking at more money and Mr. Gongo is the president, I will speak well. It's the same way with Mr. Communist. Other than that, Mr. Boga shouldn't have any place close to our president, but today people hear him to be a mayor of Kentucky. You understand? So again, we have a problem. And we're just hoping that hopefully the election goes the best way, either Mr. Congo or Mr. Cummings. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Gentlemen, let's be brief. Flomo Livingston.
Yeah, great show today. Thank you.
Coming for me.
Yeah, I just want to
I just want to start from where the caller just left. You know, the hypocrisy that in Liberia is so worse. How can you say Mr. Comey is an integrity? Mr. Comey have an integrity, but the people around him have tainted character. Again, to Mr. Gongolo, Gongolo on the show, you always say United Party was corrupt, but yet you work in the United Party government and receive pay. So if you say the United Party government was corrupt, then I mean you're getting corrupt government money. So
I should not get paid when I work.
No, you work in the United Party. Let me finish. You work in the United Party that you said was corrupt, but yet you still get paid with the corrupt money. No, we have to know the difference from institution. United Party is an institution, not a human being. All right, it's an institution run by people. So you work there, your brother worked there. So that means if you say the institution was corrupt, that means you were corrupt too. Again, the second question, if you say your brother was an SG, your brother was an SG. Your brother was an SG, but he can't show any. I'm on a case you were able to win as a solicitor general.
If you don't win case of corruption,
when we come to this discourse, let's take the emotion out, all right? No, let's take the emotion out. Again, when
Mr. Livingston Flomo or Dennis.
Mr. Congo, let him finish.
Let me finish. So when it comes to Helen Costa's scam, again, people need to comprehend what Helen Costa said. He said powerful people in the Liberian body politic. So how will you say that the poor are foreigner? Yeah, there's no problem of GMB going to meet someone to a business partner. All politicians does that. If you call me, even his brother Congo in the United States, he met with other business people. But did he address the nation about it? No. Mr. Comey met business people, white people, and he didn't address the nation about it. So we need to stop the hypocrisy. And if we want to criticize, everybody will have to criticize each and everyone, not just pick and choose.
Thank you.
So that's my point I'm saying. Let's start to be emotional and speak to the fact and be objective.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gongolo, please jot your point down so you can.
No, but Dennis, I disagree with you though. If a caller is asking question on this platform based on wrong premise and misinforming all our listeners, you ought to intervene and say this is the right information. Okay. For example, the guy is saying, if I don't know? Once the government is corrupt, it means you are corrupt too.
Yeah, but
what's the father
so
about that? He said when you lose case, then a corruption.
So
lawyers,
hold on now. I should stop him from talking, or what you want me to do?
Well, then I can intervene. I'm a panelist.
But then you are talking. The two of you are talking over each other, so I don't know who to listen to. So I'm saying, wait, let him finish, and then you can come and rebut.
But Google, I think we always hear that that issue of corruption in Unity Party government. You talk a lot about it. Either it's true or not. You could say there were a lot of corrupt people in the government, but there were, you could say you work in the government, but you were not corrupt. Your brother worked in the government; he was not corrupt. So were thousands of people who also served the country daily without being corrupt. But whenever you use the term the Unity Party government was corrupt, then you are putting yourself inside, and somebody will point and say, "Yeah, you were there too." And your brother was there for 5 years before he resigned.
No. So
there's no, you can't choose and pay how you condemn something.
No.
Either you say, okay, some people were corrupt in the government. I know John Brown was corrupt, he did this. I know Jenny was corrupt, she did it. I know Harriet was corrupt, she did that. And then you lay your case because you have a mind to do that. But when you talk about, when you gang people together, Unity Party, then they say, hey, yeah, you were there too, my man.
So
what you do?
Do if I can ask you this question. What was your reaction when John Molu serving as Auditor General? He said the Unity Party government was three times corrupt. In fact, at that point, he said this government is 3 times corrupt than Judy Bryan government. That was John saying that.
My reation was
he was working as an Auditor General in the government.
No. You asked me a question. Let me answer. I was there.
Yeah.
I knew John.
I asked you, what is your reaction?
No. I'm going to give my reaction. I knew John 5 years before he went to Liberia. In fact, I would say I would help him get into our politics. Somehow, he was not interested in politics. He wanted to write some pieces, and that's how he got into perspective. And then he went to Liberia. When he made that comment, I said, John, you did it wrong because you have not audited a single person yet. You're speaking from a political perspective. People came and made a report to you. They gave you files, but officially you have not audited a single person. I told him that. I had that discussion with him. And I said, when you say government is corrupt, you have to point to where is corruption, where is mismanagement, where is misplacement, misappropriation.
Thank you, Dr. Duke.
So will you say John was corrupt?
Hold on now, Mr. Gongo.
I never said government was corrupt. I said there are corrupt people. I never said government was corrupt. And like you, I said people were corrupt in the government. But I would never say if the government was corrupt.
Can I bring in more colors? I want to exhaust my cross first.
Will you say John Molu was corrupt also? That was the Auditor General speaking.
No. I didn't say
it was
corrupt. Control the show, man.
All right. Let me bring in more callers here. We have Maurice Kuruma. Maurice, you are live.
Thank you, Dennis, for the opportunity, and thank you to the panelists for such a great conversation. I'm very fascinated by the brain trust that is on your show tonight. But I wanted to talk about this corruption thing. I think one of the panelists was talking about how it was important to set up institutions, and those institutions were supposed to be the gatekeepers for corruption. And I like the way Dr. Duke really summed it up at the end of the show when he talked about, corruption being a systemic issue in the society. So we can set up all the institutions that we want. They are only as functional as the citizens that are in the country. The society is generally corrupt. The 5-year-old child in Liberia is corrupt. It's a post-conflict situation that we have not been able to address. I don't think the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf administration did much to fix this problem. The institutions were set up, yes, but there were still allegations of corruption that went with impunity, that not a lot was done to stem the issue, into the back door. And the Caleb also said the national legislature also enjoyed the culture of corruption. They've been able to allocate tremendous amount of resources. The U.S. ambassador saying it, recently seemed like a shocker to many Liberians. But this is something that most of us have said for years. That these people, have used the power to, allot tremendous amount of, resources to themselves. They've built, schools and hospitals ethically and use the resources from the state to support those institutions that they've constructed. We've said those things several times, and they've gone on deaf ears. Some of these people are getting elected. So if somebody's serving in national leader for 18 years or 26 years, that's a quarter of their life. Whereas a child that is born at 0 at 18 or 26 years old in Lofa County or somewhere in Batolo County is still denied access to healthcare, education, and all that good stuff. So, corruption cannot be fixed unless we change the behavior, and that behavior pattern. That's why when Caleb and I have this conversation often, I tell him, it's good for Jawan Bongo to talk about fighting corruption, but he can't do it. He can't do it alone. There has to be a behavioral change, and unless we shift that behavior, nothing is going to happen. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you. Don't call Caleb name before you can't talk again.
No, but Caleb, he just go on. I think he's still using emotion to it. He needs to just calm down a little bit.
Ben Jonah, go ahead, Ben. You have a minute.
Yeah, thank you. I think the other brother who spoke before this brother was confused about people working in a corrupt system. It doesn't mean because you get paid from a corrupt system, that means that you are corrupt. People can work in a corrupt system and still not be corrupt. So I hope he gets that point. But I was a little disappointed with the bringing of Justice, what's his name, Janet. And here's why. Because we all know that there is no way possible Justice Janet would have given any opinion about this bad government that we are being affected. The reason being of his past experience with how they treated him. So I really wanted somebody to have someone with more objective, view of this situation. Of the whole situation. I think he was not the right person. And you saw, and you saw the way in which he was going about it. I mean, one of the comments even asked him if he even knew if that law actually existed, and yes, so he did not even have the answer to that. But that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. But for your information, I've had Justice Jana here several times, and his views have been very balanced. Even in instances, hold on. And what specifically did he say that was not balanced? All right. But thank you, Ben. We got two more callers. Let me get. Thank you.
All right.
Hassan Connor, and then we'll have either Emmanuel Nambe or Victor Nambe, one of them. But Hassan, go ahead.
It's almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're complaining now after you.
I know I got 1 minute, but this is a couple of points that I got to take on when it comes to the corruption issue. We're beating a dead horse. We already know we can go from 1847, 1822, all the way down to currently as I'm speaking to you on this phone. We already know exactly what's happening, what's wrong with our country. The thing that we should all be talking about is the best way forward. Right? So we can all sit here and beat this dead horse and say, oh yeah, this other person did this, and do the whataboutism game, and people can comment, be political pundits and stuff like that, and try to spin stuff. But the best thing is, the way forward is, as we speak now, what is the best way for us to go forward, like Mr. Bongo said, right? So we don't turn into a Haiti, right? And one of the points that Elvis made was, about corruption. You can't get rid of corruption. There's different form of corruption, right? The corruption that is affecting us now is the one where the people are actually stealing from the, how you call it, from the government and building houses and all those things and stuff like that. So if we can get rid of that, then down the road, right, we can start looking into other things. But the first thing we have to do is kill the alligator that's closer to the boat, which is people in government stealing and stuff like that. And so some of the callers are calling, some of these people are confused and stuff. The only thing I can say is this is an emotional and sentimental thing is we all go back to the same country. We all complain about the same thing, about the potholes, about all of those things and stuff like that. So we can say America and try to think and make people confident. We all got to go back to that thing. Like Trump, Trump said it back in the same S4 countries and stuff like that. I'm sorry for my expression. And so we got to be sincere with ourselves in what we want from our country, what we really want, So that's what I got to say tonight, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get my last caller here, and that's Mr. or Mrs. Nambe. Go ahead, you're live.
Thank you, Dennis. Good evening, and thank you all tonight. I came here a little late, but I managed to catch most of what you were saying. And I really like what the previous caller just indicated. I think all of this talk is to answer the question of how do we move forward? What is the best way to move forward? The president has the CDC, and he's still cobbling up other parties. He's building the CDC. We try the CPP, and look where that got us. So, how many of us, including myself, including those of you on the panel tonight, including my friend Jerome, who's writing all over the place there, how many of us will commit to going to talk to somebody? I understand, as of the last count, there's like 46 parties in our little country. 46. Come on. Where are we going with all these parties? Most of these people know they're not going anywhere. They know that. So I think the challenge really is for us to unite our forces. Otherwise, we're playing in the hands of the incumbent. This president will win this thing, and we will complain, and we will have ourselves to blame. So I'm challenging all of us, including all of you on the panel tonight. How many of you will leave here tonight to go and talk to one of your brothers who may have erected a political party, or your sister or your uncle, and let them say, no, look, I know you mean well, but you're not going anywhere. Why don't you collaborate with this person and that person so that together we can form a united force? Otherwise, all this talk we're talking, we're not really going anywhere.
Thank you.
So thank you. And Dennis, please tell Elvis to stop trying to always be the first caller. What's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, but try to beat him.
So are you saying we should, you want to use us to silence our relatives, our friends in a democratic space?
In other words, to be corrupt. No.
Thank you. All right. Councillor, no, he's not councillor. The man that's math man. Mr. Gonglo, 1 minute for your response. You were so animated during the call.
Well, Dennis, I think all there were other callers that dealt with the guy who talked about me being paid, and I asked do and to clarify that because I know John Mulu made the statement while serving in the same government. In fact, there was some people calling on you, don't resign. If you say so, then resign because you can be part of the same government. But you was the Auditor General and you remained there for a lot length of time. You know, so I mean, that's how much I can say.
Thank you. Let's get to our Tabata of the week.
Jonathan, I just wanted to squeeze in something on this whole corruption issue before we get to Tabata.
Okay.
You know, like one of the callers said, we set up all of these institutions. We should allow them to work for us to be able to reduce or minimize corruption.
What does that even mean? Allow them to work.
Say, for instance, right? Like I think I said on one of the previous shows, as far back as 2008, Sierra Leone granted the Anti-Corruption Commission direct prosecutorial authority. So everything Bio had done, all the assets that he recovered, he had already met that law. He only utilized the law to be able to recover assets that he recovered. For us, we established in 2008 and we subjected it to the Ministry of Justice. And all those years, it was Anti-Corruption Commission submit a case, then the Ministry of Justice says you don't have strong evidence. So all of the cases got lost between the Ministry of Justice and the LACC. Now they have direct prosecutorial power, but the law itself has been watered down, that you can't even arrest anybody until the person is at the point of leaving Liberia. The LACC cannot comment on any case that is investigating. Everything has to be a secret. And the point I want to push through here is that we establish these institutions, and if they don't work, then even the resources that we are spending, the LACC has staff, we pay them. If they don't recover any asset, they don't prevent corruption. So all those resources that we are paying to LACC, ACL, with all of the staff they benefit, everything goes in vain. So it's not only the money that we are losing that is getting stolen, but we are also losing money by paying these institutions, the Information Commission, and everything we've set up. All of them are not working. And in the end, we're just losing money.
Thank you. Thomas, that's what happens in a nation that is ruled by the rule of impunity. That's what can happen.
Dennis, I also have a quick point to push through here. You can even take it from my Tabata, though it's not Tabata. I think we're talking in circles and we're all saying the same thing because we all want the same thing for our country. We mean well for Liberia. Every nation that has made a pivot, that has moved forward from conflict, from backwardness, from poverty, from domination by other powers, they have had to stop and look at an inflection point and say, okay, the question Namgo was asking, what do we want? How do we move forward? There are few examples. It has happened. It's doable. We can do it. In Singapore, what the Lee Kuan Yews do, he said, look, I'll prosecute the ministers, the most powerful people. I'll pay you well. If you steal, you can be my brother, my son, my brother-in-law, you go to jail. You have due process, right? Your due process is what are the procedure of I will investigate the evidence to make sure that you actually did something and you're found guilty before a competent court. You go to jail. We start doing that, people will get scared. The three things that they did, and you can, this is a ton has been written about this, about Singapore, right? And a lot of people show example. Number one, you set up the education system, you start educating people, building technician and technical politics and so on, policy people and so on, so that you have a competent workforce, a competent educated citizenry. In the meantime, you begin to say, look, we want to build this country to move it forward. The way we can do this, you cannot take the public resources for yourself and you know, for your own aggrandizement and distribute it to your nuclear family or your extended family network. It won't work. If you have skills, you're educated, you're trained, you're a teacher, you're a nurse, we will pay you a living wage so that you can live comfortably. Because in Liberia, people, they're stealing the public resources because they don't have any other industries or things that they can go and practice and live and do well. And they've established a certain lifestyle. Those are the kinds of big questions that we will have to really sit down and confront. Without that, the institution that Morris Krumah was talking about, is the people, is not an institution. It's the institution. Because if you set an example, people respect the law, other people will be scared. The smaller people, less powerful people in the society, I'm not condescending on anyone, will say, yo, if they can prosecute Mohammed Sharif or some minister up there, I'm not going to do this thing here because mine will be worse. That's what other countries have done, plus other kinds of other development models they put in place to move the society forward. That doesn't mean you're 100% corruption free. No society is 100% corruption free, but at least build a culture whereby the people focus on the country. Because, like Paul Weston said, we all do well when we do well. The country, we do well individually if and when the country does well as a society.
Thank you. Now we go to.
Except that Doe executed 13 people for corruption, so not many countries did that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was even for corruption. But that's another story.
They say it was for rampant corruption.
That was the pronounced one, but what really was it? Ferguson 1 year said Matabata is when the people president we are will win clean election. People president. I don't understand.
People are burnt. People are burnt dead. I mean, people.
And Flomo Livingston said Matabata is Kalebo Gonglo can't give the other panelists to speak.
Flomo come on the show for me, so no.
Flomo said you come on the show for Boakai, so.
And he comes for me too.
Yeah. So equal, no pattern. So at this time, let's go around the room for your Tabata of the week. Kalebo, you go first.
Why you want me to go first?
All right, I go first.
Because my Tabata is on Boaga though. So.
Yeah, my Tabata of the week is still Henry Costa implicating himself without knowing that accepting 30 million or agreeing, calling it a golden opportunity, is the worst than what he's accusing Boakai of. And the entire republic, not many people spoke to that, but they were concerned, okay, is it Boakai or is it Costa? But I think my Tabata is implicating yourself of soliciting or talking about bribe and thinking it's a golden opportunity. To me, that's Tabata. Gonglo, you go next.
Well, my Tabata is, I would say, it's on the nation Liberia. We Liberians, majority of Liberians say we want a good nation. But we'll go for the worst among us to give for a good nation. And for me, it does not make sense. If we liked the likes of Kuhn, the likes of Prince Johnson, the likes of Thomas Fowler, even the likes of Boakai, who has refused to be audited, but then we say we want good nation. It does not make sense.
Thank you. Dr. Dugley, what's your Tabata of the week?
My Tabata of the week, the divorce between Costa and Boakai. That's all.
Mr. Sharif.
Yes. What is mine?
Your Tabata of the week.
McGill's reemergence. He never went anywhere, but his reemergence is my Tabata of the week, and it's a theme that speaks to all of what we are talking about, all of what we talk about tonight. How is it that he's able to reemerge? And now he's going to be elected for 9 years to start off. So he's going to go into the legislature. That's where he's going to now make more money. Ahmed mentioned this. This is where people go now. Government is where everyone goes to get rich and famous. If you don't work for Liberian government, you're not rich and famous. You have to work for government. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, your Tabata of the week.
I think it's the whole Boakai medical record thing, where Costa saying that the doctors told him that Baka would die in 6 months since March. If Baka doesn't do an open heart surgery and that he has the medical record, I think that is just a facade. It's here not here in America. Nobody will give you somebody's medical record. No doctor would do prognosis on on their patient and talk to you. The person is not incapacitated. The person is with it legally, and they have relatives, next of kin, and you are the one who this information is according to Mr. Costa himself.
Maybe he has the power of attorney.
So the whole thing is a Tabata to me. It just didn't make sense. It made me to start poking holes in the rest of the story.
Thomas, your Tabata of the week.
Yeah, also on the Costa issue, he managed to remember everything, but these powerful people, I think he forgot who they are, or he's holding back on them. So I don't really agree that everybody goes to Facebook and say, oh, earlier was man can talk all, but man finish talking all. I really don't think man has put everything out there. But then there was this video I saw, after the CDC primaries, the representative of district number, is that 9? Yeah, I think district number 9.
That's Smith?
No, this Foucault. So he was giving his acceptance speech. And so it was, I think it was heavily contested. He won, and he was congratulating the president who lost, that tomorrow we are coming to have breakfast with you. You need to join us so that we can make sure we make President George Weah a one-term president. And so it's kind of interesting where the guys just go and cut that share of the video and they start to share it all around. So when I listened to it, it was really funny to me. I don't know whether he came back to correct himself.
Yeah.
Or he just...
Yeah, I think he corrected himself in the same...
So it was really interesting to me. I laughed about it a lot.
I had a Josephine Davis speech there, Thomas.
Yeah. But at least she came back to correct herself.
All right. Our viewers who have their Tabata. G. Gwen John Smith, my Tabata is the people who institutionalized corruption for 12 years, now having press release against corruption. Nonsense. Nobody's stupid here. Sam Wallow, the Tabata of the week is the incredible failed fairy tale and scheme designed to box VP Bouaka in on his running mate decision. Maurice Gassama, my Tabata is Gonglo on the show to represent another Gonglo. Oh God, he talking now. You mute yourself and then you talking, then you will say, "I cause it." Emmanuel Jackson say, "My Tabata Kalebo always very objective on the issues about Liberia, even on the Costa show." J. Victor Namwe, my Tabata of the week is the cow saga. Well, a lot of Tabata. Every day there's some Tabata going on, and the more we talk about the Tabata, the more. For those of you who know, Tabata is nonsense, complete foolishness. That's a crude speaking word. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for tonight. I think we had a great show. Let me get your 10 seconds pattern comment, starting with Thomas.
Well, great show. I think the issue of corruption, we shouldn't get tired talking about it. We should continue to talk about it, improve governance institutions. And in addition to the Singapore story, I mean, I had a classmate from Saudi Arabia. I was shocked because I've always thought Saudi Arabia is this religious institute, a country. They have rules and regulations. And he was speaking about corruption in Saudi Arabia. And he said a couple of years ago, the high people were collected, put in jail, and that shocked the whole system. And he said, right now, when you go corruption and all of these backroom channels that people used to use to do stuff in Saudi Arabia, it has really calmed down. So I think it comes back to the point. And I used to work with someone who was...
You got 30 seconds, right?
30 seconds, yeah, who was aged enough. And he told me that when President Sally was elected newly, and she had a corruption issue, that corruption is public enemy number one, people were afraid. Until she herself started to slip on, I think, Lucini Donso issue or something. But so I still believe that once we have a leader who can start from the top to say there will be a shock in the system, or a government that will come and prosecute other governments, we can start to minimize corruption. So let's not lose hope. I think we can change things around.
Mr. Salif, 30 seconds closing.
Yes, I'll build on that kind of strength. Look, it's doable, it's possible. Other countries have done it. You come in as a visionary leader, you have the goal to move your country forward, to pull your country out of poverty. People say, look, it is the mindset of the people from the bottom, educated little children. No, as you educate them, they get corrupted, they get diluted. It's not going to happen. Go to the top, prosecute people, confiscate ill-gotten wealth and property, give it back to the state, put it to public use. People will see that the best place to go and get wealthy is not public, is not government. Go there to serve, go to public service for the sake of public service, make your own money through ingenuity, through private sector and the other means. So yes, we can really turn Liberia around. We have to be willing to sit down, have that conversation. Now is the inflection point we can do it.
Thank you. Mr. Gonglo, the 30-second closing.
All right. So yeah, what I will say on this show and in previous show, we've all agreed that corruption is Liberia, the number one issue we need to deal with. The only person in this election that has shown the courage and the record has proved that is Councillor Gonglo. He has been very clear on how he's going to fight corruption. He has been very clear that you can have whatever economic policy if there is no respect for rule of law. If you have a country in chaos ruled by the rule of impunity, there will be no investment. It's very clear that from day one, the first 100 days, you're going to have executive order issue to make sure that any government official that undermines the execution of police duty or enforcement of police action, that government official will be suspended and investigated. If found guilty, can go to jail by any law that government official has violated. It's also been very clear that any minister caught in corruption will be dismissed, sent to LACC, and when found guilty, all the assets you accumulated, the proceeds from that crime will be taken. And he said that's how he's going to burn corruption. He also went one step forward. He said he will institute lifestyle audit, that it will begin within every 6 months. Auditors will start with the office of the president. He will list the assets he has listed from the starting, and they will track it throughout, and the same will be done with. There is no person in the history of Liberia wanting to be the leader that has been so clear on how to fight corruption. And I think he's better prepared and has the courage to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif.
So one of the things that several things, but it's very important to note that Liberian government officials are well paid. They are one of the highest paid, civil servants in Africa. In the United States, you see that. Well, we talked about this one time, where the Speaker of the Liberian legislature is better paid than Nancy Pelosi. How is that possible? So as long as this is going on, these thieves are going to congregate in the halls of power to steal the Liberian people money. Liberia is a tragedy. Right now, if you make me president, I think, all these people have to go to jail. Everybody have to go to jail and account. Ahmed, you're right. These people have to be able to pay it back. Not only go to jail and then, the justice minister says, oh, we don't have enough evidence, because they themselves are incompetent. They don't convict anybody. So as a result, a lot of good people are throwing their hands up and say, look, I can't do it. I can't do it. Look, Dr. Duke is saying, he's like, Dr. Duke is like, gave up, gave up sort of, you know what I mean? Like this should not be happening. Good people are giving up on Liberia. I'm giving up. I'm giving up. Good people giving up. And last show I said, how was I born in Liberia? It's my way. It was out of frustration. People shouldn't think that I'm not patriotic. I'm patriotic, but out of frustration of seeing thieves who overnight are now overnight millionaires, And then you have trash all over the place. You can't clean your trash. You expect the American government to clean your damn trash. Sewage running across your city, and you expect the Americans to give you money to build your country. Now you're going to China now, and the oligarchs in Russia take money from them. You are selling your country. So it's why I will always come back to pay to play, because the Chinese are very active now, trying to buy us, trying to buy our countries for cheap. They're trying to take everything away for cheap. The Russians are on the move also. Everybody is coming now, taking our country, taking our wealth and resources away. Then this is serious. It's a serious deal. And meanwhile, you have these thieves, who have no intellectual curiosity, who have no patriotism in their vein, that are selling our country. They have little universities here and there that are not credible. Because if I went to one of these universities, you think I'm going to bring that back to the United States and say, "Oh, Dennis, look at my degree. I went to Prince Johnson University." You think I'm going to do that? You think I'm going to come back and say, "Oh, Dennis, look at my degree from Thomas Fowler University"? You think I'm going to do that? I'm probably going to put it in the toilet. So this is where we are. Okay, I'm very fed up. I'm very fed up.
You're gonna need a plumber if you did that, because you clog the tap.
You may go to
Dr. Douglas, you're closing.
treatment.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and I enjoyed this discussion tonight. And talking about corruption, corruption is more, it's not just stealing money. You have a system that is totally corrupt in its bone. The justice system is corrupt. The educational system is corrupt. The health system is corrupt. So when you're looking at some people stole some money, yeah, but you could go deeper. Whether all that, how do we accept it? How does somebody who was, banned from being a government say, you can't even serve the president because you're still corrupt? The next day, got millions of people behind him, and then nobody says anything. Nobody cares. Say, oh yeah, Americans say. We don't say Liberian people say. We say the American people say. We don't say the Ministry of Justice said this about the corrupt people. It's just the American people say. And that also is a corrupt, politics. Our politics is corrupt because we don't have the force to stand on our own truth. John Molu said, talking about John Molu, he said, yeah, corruption, we were talking about educating people about corruption. He said, yeah, but if you lock the man up, lock him up, take his car and his house away, that's education. So I think corruption is everywhere, is rampant. I think Madam Sely, whatever we say about that she created institutions. Why didn't the institution work? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. She created an institution, put credible people in there. Remember the first time, I'm not talking about the second time. All these credible people came in and then start doing their work. In the end, nothing. So what is it? Is it because Liberians are corrupt? Or is it because they're in the government, they're corrupt? They're corrupt because they're in the government, or they're corrupt because they're Liberians? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. When does corruption start? When does it start? Every system we have is corrupt. Every system we have in Liberia, because I'm still talking about this transfer of power in 1980, that people came in who have no knowledge of the principles, the morals, and the values that created Liberian state from 1824. Either was good or bad, but those institutions, people say, yeah, Christian principle, but it worked for a while. It worked in 1980. It worked for a class of people. And then people who were outside took over, and then they knew is the trappings of power, nothing else. The cars, the money, and the big food. So I think we'll talk about it until we reform the system completely. Systematic reformation of the state will be inside. I don't think one president can do it. I don't think two presidents can do it. And I think we're going to be inside for a long, long time.
On that note, I want to say thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you for the night. Thank our viewers and even those who will watch later. At this time, we're going to close and draw down the curtains with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Let us not forget that in spite of everything else, whatever background you may come from, we are all Liberians, and that is very important. Have a good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.